everyone. Good interview today. Paramount Gold is very close to getting their mining permit to build their first mine. And I'm happy to welcome Rachel Goldman, the CEO of Paramount.
Thank you, Ron. It's great to be here with you.
Yes, so the news was just out. You got your notice to proceed for Grassy, and the stock has been moving up after that as well. So it's looking good. Kind of where do things go from now on the permitting side?
Yeah, it was the news that you're referring to, obviously, was a huge piece of news for the company. This was literally 2 years in the making, practically, to have our application being reviewed by the state of Oregon. So just as a reminder, this Grassy Mountain is the very first project moving through the permitting regime in Oregon. So we are breaking new ground, literally and figuratively here. And the process is such that you go through an extensive review period, because essentially you need to ensure that all the permitting agencies have all the information that they need to actually start drafting permits. So the first indication that we had that was finally moving in the right direction was in early October. They announced that the application was deemed complete. And that's basically, again, that's the conclusion of the review period. And then that triggers what's called the notice to proceed that you referred to, which is document issued by the DOGAMI, which is the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries in Oregon. And that notice to proceed is a formal start to the agencies then having a 1-year time frame to issue final permits. But along the way, we're going to have a number of opportunities to see how their process is tracking. And I think those will be good catalysts as well for the market to see that Oregon is actually moving forward. Because I would say over the last number of years, and maybe this is what we're starting to see in the stock, the single biggest feedback I got since I joined Paramount was Oregon's never going to permit a mine. And I think the analysis was based on the fact that Oregon had never done it before, although that leaves out the simple fact that nobody else had ever applied. So Grassy was the first project to ever start to move through this process. And so, again, this is new territory, not just for Paramount, but for the agencies as well. And we really want to ensure that we're doing it in a way that's collaborative, that we're working with them, that everybody's got the comfort zone where it should be. And so far, so good. For Paramount specifically, and I have a couple of slides that I can bring up as we talk about this. The notice to proceed also has significance for us as a company, not just for the state of Oregon. So this is what we're referring to. Like I said, we are the first ones ever going through it. What we're going to see coming up then over the course of the next 12 months before we get the final permits, which are, soft circled for December of 2024, we will see the completion of a third-party environmental evaluation that's being conducted by Stantec on behalf of the state of Oregon. That will be released in January. And then we'll also see the receipt of draft permits, likely in August. And then that gives them a certain amount of time to complete public review period, comment period, before issuing final permits in December. However, for Paramount, this has double significance because back in March, we had announced that we'd signed a term sheet with Sprott. This is the streaming and royalty arm of Sprott for a $15 million financing. And it's a financing that takes the form of a royalty convertible note. So while it starts as a convertible in Paramount, which we will pay interest in either cash or shares, what it actually converts into isn't stock, it converts into a royalty on Grassy. And so one of the conditions to closing this financing, in addition to getting all the appropriate approvals and completing the definitive documentation, but one of the key criteria was the receipt of the notice to proceed, which now we have in hand. And so we continue to move forward on the documentation for this deal. And we feel confident that we'll see this close in this calendar year, which will be obviously after 2 years of very challenging markets for junior companies. It'll put us in a very good position, number one, to be able to pay off the existing debt that we have on our balance sheet, bring in a very well-known natural resource development partner, and keep us funded through until we get those permits and are able to start looking at the next steps in terms of construction financing and moving Grassy forward. So it's a very, very exciting time for us. Everything seems to have converged here at the end of the year, but better end of the year than not at all. So we're quite excited to move forward on that.
So with the 15 million, I guess you're going to kind of go through that. You're still going to have an equity portion, I guess, for the mine development.
That's right. I mean, the mine construction, there are a number of steps we would see happen before then. We will at some point have to update the feasibility study, detailed engineering, all the bits that you'd need to be able to secure a financing package. And, just as a reminder, the CapEx at Grassy is roughly 140 million, including contingencies. So it's not a huge amount. The margins are strong given it's a high grade property at 6.8 grams as the small underground mine that we're going to be building. So, typically you'll see some, significant ratio of debt and equity that get contributed here. And from our standpoint, because there's been so much unknown about permitting, our view was that, number one, de-risking the project through permitting in an environment where there was skepticism that Oregon was going to permit a mine, we'll likely be looking at a better cost of capital when we have permits in hand than ahead of that. So, this is a process that I think now that we have a timeline from the agencies, that we can start to fill in our other pieces of the puzzle as we move through that process with the state.
Okay, so in the next year, all this is going on. You got anything planned for any of the other properties?
Yeah, and maybe this is actually a good way to see it visually what happens here. So I'd mentioned we got that completeness determination and then the notice to proceed, and then we're two more steps this year until we get those final permits. So yes, that'll be definitely priority one. De-risking Grassy and moving it forward has been our key focus. What I would say is, I know that you're a fan of Sleeper, as am I, because it's in a great jurisdiction. So just, flipping to Nevada for a minute here. Earlier this year as well, we filed an updated technical report summary. So this SK 1300 is the SEC equivalent of a 43101. But basically what it did is it brought up to modern standards the resource that we had at Sleeper. So last year when we put out our initial resource statement, we literally and our consultants hadn't had time to work through the mounds of data that existed on Sleeper, as an asset that was previously in production and having seen a lot of drilling over the years prior. There are a lot of data points to work through, which is good news because, we have a substantial land position here in a desirable part of the world in Nevada. But it also meant that when we redid this resource statement, again, to comply with these SEC rules, there was a lot of work that went into it. And frankly, there had been a lot of the historic drilling done, from 30 and 40 years ago, which had never been digitized. So it was really a big effort to get it up to this standard. But now we have a very, robust, defensible, modern resource here. So we're already in excess of 3 million ounces at Sleeper, albeit it's low grade, but it's, these are grades that are mineable through an open pit heap leach in Nevada. And there's certainly ample opportunity to see some additional exploration work done at Sleeper before any sort of restart plan is contemplated. So, it's a jurisdiction that's well known. It would probably be about 3 years to bring it back into production once that decision is taken. But like I said, I think there's also, you know, some good rationale to putting in some additional drilling to see if we can both identify higher grades and, you know, perhaps, I don't know if we'll ever find a vein like what the original 7 gram per ton sleeper vein was, but it would certainly be a great opportunity to see if we can raise the average grade beyond the 0.53 that we have in the measured, or the 0.35 that we have here in the indicated category.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's interesting. Sounds good. I was wondering, I've noticed there's a lot of, you know, M&A activity in the miners, and you know, you guys are pretty undervalued. Someone comes along, say maybe a mid-tier, whatever, and offers you, you know, 50% premium on the stock. How's management going to respond, or what's your thoughts there?
Well, what I would say about that is that we actually have a pretty substantial group of insiders and long-term shareholders that in combined are probably close to 30% right now of the company. So as you know, Seabridge is one of our big shareholders. We have FCMI, who's been a shareholder for a long time, and I'm not speaking out of school because that's all filed in public documents. And, you know, with the benefit of having long-term supporters in here is A, they're there to support us when the rest of the market isn't. But B, they understand that we were undertaking something that had a longer time horizon, perhaps, than the market also is used to as we go through the permitting at Grassy. So while it's not impossible, I mean, I too have been seeing a lot of different M&A crop up in the sector, which I think ultimately is a good thing. You know, I think having some rationalization of the number of companies chasing, you know, fewer investment dollars or fewer investable assets is probably not a bad thing. From a Paramount standpoint, I mean, certainly we would like to see it get to, you know, the ultimate de-risking of having permits in hand, because we have been of the belief that this will be a re-rating potential for the company, but we also need to be pragmatic about where we are in the cycle. And, you know, certainly we're here to try and maximize the value that will ultimately accrue to shareholders. And so I think it's through that lens that we would analyze any proposal that came in between now and when we do get those final permits, because ultimately that's what it's about, is generating a return for shareholders.
Okay, no, that sounds yeah, good answer. You know, hope, see what happens. You never know, but I think, you know, you guys are on a really great path here, and I think the markets will start to turn, especially in 2024 is my belief. So yeah, the future looks pretty good. That's all the questions I had. Did anything else you want to highlight, or?
I guess what I would leave you with is, you know, the news to look out for from us over the coming year. You know, like I said, by the end of this calendar year, we should close on the financing, which I think will also alleviate concerns that the market may have had about how we were going to deal with our converts, how we were going to keep the company funded. I mean, this has been a real area of focus for most of our small size peers, is how to keep things moving along. And then we'll get the updated permitting milestones for Grassy as we continue throughout this year. Sleeper, we've been doing reclamation work at Sleeper. We would certainly be keen to go back in and do some additional drilling. Some of that is going to be dependent on our capital position in terms of where we can allocate. We certainly need to make sure that we stay fully funded for the permitting endeavors at Grassy. And then certainly too, the other asset that we have in our portfolio, which is a small greenfields exploration property called Bald Peak, but it is in a great jurisdiction, again, in Nevada and Mineral County, and has highly prospective. We would certainly love to have a crack at being able to drill that. But I think all of these additional things that I would say are somewhat discretionary will depend on market conditions and whether there's even an appetite for exploration amongst juniors, because certainly the feedback I get from a lot of investors is that they would like to see us stay funded and, park an exploration away for another day. So, we have to balance out all of those interests against the practicality of where we are in terms of the market and where we are in terms of our balance sheet.
Okay, yeah, I agree as far as that goes. Not much favor in the exploration right now. But
That's
anyway,
right.
yeah, thanks for coming back on Play Stocks and giving the update. It was really good, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Ron. Anytime.
Okay, bye for now.
Okay, bye-bye.